It's a disaster, a total disaster. Boston is completely ruined. According to sports reports, the Boston Celtics have traded Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. This trade has completely broken the mental state of Celtics fans in Boston. Some fans are calling Brad Stevens a terrorist, and posts demanding his firing are getting a massive amount of likes. The diehards are completely heartbroken. Mainstream media has unanimously bashed this trade. CBS gave Philly an A+, while handing the Celtics a D-, and other outlets straight up hit the Celtics with an F grade. The last time we saw an F-grade trade was when the Mavericks supposedly shipped Luka Doncic to the Lakers. Is this trade really that bad? Has Brad Stevens actually lost his mind? I'm afraid things aren't that simple. Today, we are going to dive deep into this supposedly F-grade super flop of a trade. The key to understanding this move is figuring out Jaylen Brown's actual ability and market value. Last season, Jaylen Brown had a career year, averaging a career high of 28.7 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 5.1 assists, ranking 4th in the league in scoring with incredibly flashy skill sets. Led by Brown, the Celtics also put up an impressive record. Even with Jayson Tatum and Kristaps Porzingis sidelined with season-ending injuries and the roster heavily downgraded, they still managed to secure 56 wins and the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. The most basic way to judge a player's value is usually through their raw stats and team record. Bad stats and a bad record usually mean a role player on a lottery team. Bad stats and a good record usually mean a role player on a contender. Great stats and a bad record make you an empty stats filler, but great stats and a great record, that makes you a legitimate MVP candidate. Brown had the stats and the wins, and he actually became an MVP contender, finishing 6th in voting and making All-NBA second team. Judging by the votes, he was the 6th best player in the regular season, and combined with his past FMVP trophy, his superstar status reached elite heights. However, Brown has always had a fatal flaw. His baseline stats are flashy, but his advanced metrics have always been thoroughly mediocre, which is why data analytics experts have never fully bought into him. Usually, MVP contenders have an EPM of 7 or 8, or at the very least above 5. But even in Brown's absolute best career season, his EPM was only 3.3. His PER, player efficiency rating, was an even bigger disaster, ranking 4th on his own team, behind even Drew Holiday. I believe that once you study a player closely enough, you can pretty much ignore advanced metrics. They are fine for a rough overview, but they should never be used to definitively judge how good a player is. Other advanced stats share the same issue. They are just catch-all formulas built on the subjective biases of data analysts. Nowadays, I prefer looking at objective, fact-based on-court realities. The real issue with Brown is that his fact-based on-court real data is also highly problematic. This year, as the Celtics' primary star, the team outscored opponents by 6.7 points per 100 possessions when he was on the floor. But when he sat, the team outscored opponents by a staggering 12.9 points. In games where Brown played, the Celtics went 47-27, a 66.2% win percentage. In games he missed, the Celtics went 9-2, an 81.8% win percentage. No legitimate top-tier superstar has a team that performs significantly better in their absence. You can argue that the Celtics have an elite bench and a great system that inflates data during transitional lineups, but if that's the case, why is it that on this exact same team, whenever Jayson Tatum is on the floor, the team wins by an even wider margin? Lately, a lot of people have been hyping up the stat that Jaylen Brown has the highest career winning percentage of any player over the last decade. On paper, that number sounds terrifying, but you have to look at the catch. In the 674 games Brown actually played, his win percentage was 65%. But in the 125 games he missed, the team's win percentage shot up to 70.4%. They win at a higher clip without him. You can turn a blind eye to advanced metrics, but you cannot argue with a decade-long reality that your team simply wins more when you are off the floor. In my opinion, Jaylen Brown is essentially just a highly compatible version of DeMar DeRozan. Their career accolades and resumes are incredibly similar. In 2018, DeRozan made All-NBA second team, finished 8th in MVP voting, and led his team to 59 wins. Brown made second team, finished 6th in MVP voting, and led his team to 56 wins. Their advanced numbers are neck and neck. PER is 2.3 versus 2.2, and EPM is 2.8 versus 3.3. In their respective postseason runs as leaders, DeRozan reached the second round while Brown was bounced in the first round, and both shared the identical curse of team plays better when you are off the floor. Honestly, DeRozan was actually slightly better than Brown. Brown's on-off net rating was a dreadful -6.2, while DeRozan's was barely below 0. DeRozan was the undisputed #1 option on a 60-win team, averaged 27.9 points at his peak, and made the conference finals as the clear alpha. At his peak, DeRozan lost to LeBron James's Cavaliers 3 years in a row in the playoffs, getting thoroughly toyed with every single time, which quickly labeled him as a weak alpha who lacked the ceiling to go all the way. If he hadn't run into LeBron, DeRozan's historical achievements would be vastly greater. DeRozan isn't a stat potter. He possesses elite finishing efficiency and can generate a massive volume of highly difficult mid-range looks, both of which are elite postseason skill sets. But at the end of the day, he simply isn't a qualified #1 option for a championship team. My conclusion is that Brown's situation is almost identical to DeRozan's. In fact, as a lone leader, Brown might not even be as good as DeRozan. However, his ability to play as a second option vastly eclipses DeRozan's, and that is where his true value lies. DeRozan's problem is his mediocre raw physical tools. He has vertical bounce, but his top speed and lateral agility are poor, meaning he rarely gets easy transition buckets. His offensive pace is low, forcing him to a relentless diet of difficult mid-range pull-ups. DeRozan also refused to shoot threes, failing to develop that weapon even by the mid-stage of his career. His off-ball movement is non-existent, and his defense is average, meaning you either give him the ball to isolate in the half-court or he becomes useless. He is wired to only be a #1 option, possessing zero compatibility to play as a sidekick. Brown is completely different. His athleticism is wild, he thrives in transition, possesses an explosive spot-up first step, and shoots high-volume threes with massive gravity. Brown excels as an on-ball defender, even guarding Luka Doncic in the past, bringing elite perimeter ball pressure to the defensive end. Even when he isn't acting as the primary scorer, he can still provide massive value through his off-ball cutting and defense, which is why Brown works perfectly as a championship puzzle piece while DeRozan fails. As a #1 option, Brown is on par with DeRozan, perhaps even slightly weaker. But as a #2 or #3 option, he is miles better than DeRozan. This is who Jaylen Brown truly is. As for why Brown isn't elite, we've analyzed this a lot before. His passing is thoroughly subpar, he cannot collapse a defense to elevate his teammates, and his turnovers frequently outnumber his assists. He can overpower average defenders, but against an elite wing defender like Paul George, his offense completely stalls. His individual on-ball defense is stellar, but his team defense is completely stiff. He can't read the game, and his awareness in navigating screens and help defense rotations is terrible. The Celtics' environment was just too perfect. It completely masked Brown's limitations. In that specific system, he harvested massive critical acclaim and even won a Finals MVP. But those accolades, at their core, far exceed his actual individual talent level. In my book, Brown doesn't even reach the level of an elite second option. I define him as a top-tier puzzle piece who happens to have high-volume scoring ability. Given that baseline, I believe that on a true championship contender, his appropriate salary shouldn't cross the $40 million mark, because the list of things his teammates have to cover for him is just too long. His team defense has fatal flaws, so he needs elite help-side defenders. His playmaking is poor, so his teammates need to be premier ball handlers. His spacing awareness during isolation is bad, so his teammates must possess immense gravity. Players like Porzingis, Derek White, Tatum, and Holford are simply an incredibly high-tier supporting cast, elite at defense, elite at shooting, and elite at passing. But a roster with this configuration is built entirely by stacking up a massive payroll. The year the Celtics actually won the title, Brown was only making $31 million, Tatum was making $32 million, Drew Holiday was at $37 million, and Porzingis was at $36 million. But now, Brown is making $60 million. In today's NBA, where it is impossible to talk about winning a championship without high-value surplus contracts, as long as Brown is taking up $60 million of the cap, the Celtics cannot win. They no longer enjoy the financial luxury of elite rookie-scale contracts. Both Tatum and White have signed max extensions, but at least those two fully live up to their price tags. Meanwhile, Brown's average salary over the next 3 seasons is a staggering $61 million. Given his true tier, getting out of this contract was an absolute necessity. Brad Stevens likely anticipated this exact moment when he originally handed out the deal. Signed back in 2023, that 5-year, $304 million supermax extension was the largest contract in NBA history at the time. Everyone knew it was heavily overpaid and inflated, but with the Celtics' championship window wide open back then, you had no choice but to pay it. It was a mandatory move to appease Brown so he would give his absolute all in the postseason. Drew Holiday's contract extension was also heavily inflated, a 4-year, $135 million deal averaging $34 million annually, running until he turns 38 years old. It was overpaid beyond measure. Yet, Brad Stevens didn't hesitate for a second to hand it out solely to secure Holiday's absolute maximum effort for their playoff runs. Those overpaid contracts ultimately brought a picture-perfect ending. They successfully won the championship in 2024. In 2025, they retained the exact same core to take another shot, but Holiday's play declined, and injuries to Tatum and Porzingis meant that after that season, Boston's true championship window had officially slammed shut. Even though they clawed their way to the 2nd seed in the East last season, their regular season and their first-round exit fully exposed who they really were. Their playstyle is great for racking up wins in the regular season, but when the playoffs arrive and it comes down to pure individual superstar matchups, Jaylen Brown completely shrinks under the pressure, making a roster retool mandatory. Brad Stevens dumping Brown's $60 million contract was a predetermined certainty from the very moment he signed it. Just like with Holiday, the only purpose of giving out these inflated contracts was to secure that one specific title. Once that mission is accomplished, the next job on the checklist is figuring out how to dump them. This offseason was the absolute perfect window. Next season, once Tatum returns to action, it will be physically impossible for Brown to ever put up better stats than he did this year. Last season was essentially one massive Jaylen Brown showcase. The entire team operated to keep winning while specifically tasking Brown with high-difficulty isolation scoring, allowing him to manufacture his best career numbers. Brad Stevens' marketing campaign was a massive success. Brown's trade value skyrocketed, and his perceived tier among casual fans and media members inflated drastically. Stevens initially attempted to flip Brown plus 2 first-round picks for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he came incredibly close to pulling it off. If the Miami Heat hadn't aggressively entered the sweepstakes by putting Bam Adebayo on the table, Stevens might have actually pulled off the heist. But Miami went completely nuts and emptied their entire war chest. Unwilling to panic and cough up extra first-round picks or young assets, Stevens backed out, and the dream of upgrading Brown into Giannis died. Next, Stevens initiated a league-wide fire sale, reportedly demanding a king's ransom of 4 first-round picks, but no one bid. In a final act of desperation, Stevens tried to swindle the 76ers. According to trade rumors, the Celtics' opening ask was Paul George, 4 to 5 first-round picks, and Tyrese Maxey. But Philly's front office isn't stupid. They didn't fall for the trap. After intense back-and-forth haggling, the deal finally settled for Paul George, 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders. And honestly, that is the exact real market value for Jaylen Brown right now. You can certainly complain that the Celtics lost this trade, arguing that after grinding for an entire season to build Brown into a regular season MVP 6 fake superstar with the intention of flipping him for Giannis or 4 first-rounders, they ultimately settled for just 2 firsts and 2 seconds. But looking at the bigger picture, successfully offloading that toxic $60 million annual contract while gaining 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders is actually a solid piece of damage control. Let's be real, if Tatum hadn't been injured last season, allowing Brown to inflate his value with infinite touches, how many front offices in the league would even dare touch that $60 million contract? Another massive factor influencing the perception of this trade is how people rate Paul George, whether he's still a net positive or just washed-up salary filler. George obviously isn't worth $50 million right now either, but he is being heavily underrated by the current narrative. Unlike Brown, George won't force a heavy diet of difficult, inefficient on-ball shots, but his complementary skill sets are completely off the charts. When healthy, he remains a dream two-way 3D wing. George is a historic floor spacer, shooting an incredible 50.9% on catch-and-shoot threes last season and 40.7% over his career. His mere presence on the weak side provides far more gravity than Brown ever did. Defensively, whether acting as a point of attack defender or rotating on the weak side, George's defensive IQ and presence drastically outclass Brown's. His only true red flag is his fragile attendance record, but whenever he laces up, his baseline impact is easily worth $30 million. At this point in their careers, both contracts are heavily overpaid, and neither player can lead a team to a championship as the lone alpha. But the massive difference lies in the contract duration. George only has 2 years and $111 million left on his deal, while Brown is locked into a brutal 3-year, $180 million contract.
That is a massive $70 million difference. If the Celtics didn't sell high on Brown this year, his value would have cratered next year once Tatum returned, leaving them permanently stuck with that contract. On the flip side, even if George underperforms, the Celtics only have to stomach it for 1 season before his contract becomes a highly valuable, expiring deal next summer. You can then package George's expiring contract along with your newly acquired first-round picks to go all in on the next disgruntled superstar who wants out of his team, like Nikola Jokic finally running out of patience in Denver. Suddenly, your championship window is wide open again. I don't see any issue with this trade. The Celtics didn't fleece Philly, but they definitely didn't lose. They solved their absolute #1 crisis by dumping Brown's contract, hauled in 2 future firsts, shaved millions off their immediate payroll, and guaranteed 100% luxury tax relief for next season. In terms of immediate on-court production, this roster might actually be stronger than last year's. Brown dragged a depleted squad to 56 wins last season. Now, with a healthy Tatum replacing Brown as the focal point, their baseline execution will be significantly higher. Plus, they get Paul George as a premium accessory for free. Even if George only gives them 45 regular season games, that is still a massive net positive for their rotation. They also signed a high-value champion backup center in Mitchell Robinson, meaning their championship rotation only lost an overpaid Brown while keeping every other crucial piece intact. That is a massive $70 million difference. If the Celtics didn't sell high on Brown this year, his value would have cratered next year once Tatum returned, leaving them permanently stuck with that contract. On the flip side, even if George underperforms, the Celtics only have to stomach it for 1 season before his contract becomes a highly valuable, expiring deal next summer. You can then package George's expiring contract along with your newly acquired first-round picks to go all in on the next disgruntled superstar who wants out of his team, like Nikola Jokic finally running out of patience in Denver. Suddenly, your championship window is wide open again. I don't see any issue with this trade. The Celtics didn't fleece Philly, but they definitely didn't lose. They solved their absolute #1 crisis by dumping Brown's contract, hauled in 2 future firsts, shaved millions off their immediate payroll, and guaranteed 100% luxury tax relief for next season. In terms of immediate on-court production, this roster might actually be stronger than last year's. Brown dragged a depleted squad to 56 wins last season. Now, with a healthy Tatum replacing Brown as the focal point, their baseline execution will be significantly higher. Plus, they get Paul George as a premium accessory for free.
Even if George only gives them 45 regular season games, that is still a massive net positive for their rotation. They also signed a high-value champion backup center in Mitchell Robinson, meaning their championship rotation only lost an overpaid Brown while keeping every other crucial piece intact. This trade hit every single checkmark on Brad Stevens' list: immediate production, tax relief, and future draft capital. What more could you ask for? You can't call a GM a failure just because he couldn't hustle another team into giving up Giannis for Brown. Who knows, maybe Jokic actually lands in Boston next summer because of this move. At the end of the day, this trade isn't a nightmare. The Celtics found the perfect leverage point to dump a contract they absolutely had to get rid of. Their grand showcase and trade master plan didn't net them the ultimate jackpot, but it safely preserved their championship window for years to come. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more NBA content. Thanks for watching.